Second oral question to the Minister of State, Baroness Ludford.
To ask the question standing in my name on the order paper.
My Lords, the written ministerial statement referred to sets out full details of the two reviews of retained EU law. I and other responsible ministers are, of course, ready to engage with Parliament in an appropriate way, for example, directly to this House, with interested select committees, and with noble and learned lords with a particular interest in this question. We, of course, wish to establish proposals which are likely to be acceptable to the largest possible number of parliamentarians while achieving our policy aims.
Parliament agreed with the Government that a snapshot of EU law at the point of exit should be onshored into UK law in the 2018 and 2020 Withdrawal Acts. This was for the sake of continuity, certainty and stability for manufacturers and service providers, and thus the economy, throughout the UK, including Northern Ireland beyond the protocol. A mere 9 months on, the Minister expressed his desire in what seems a highly ideological an unnecessary move when all the practical issues are unresolved of financial services and Horizon and so on, not only to take a wrecking ball to this settlement, but in a way which takes back control for the executive, such as to represent, in the words of EU law expert Professor Catherine Barnard, a full takeover by Whitehall of Westminster. The announced intention is only to incorporate Parliament's views, which is not good enough. I thus ask the Minister now for a commitment not only to involve Parliament fully in the review, but then to make any changes via primary legislation and not Henry VIII powers.
Hear, hear.
So, my Lords, the noble Baroness is of course right in saying that retained EU law was brought onto our statute book for reasons of convenience and for a smooth transition. It does not mean it can never change. Indeed, it must change, because that is how we get the benefits of reform and change after leaving the European Union, and that's the process that we intend to begin. As I've said before, I don't think it makes sense for rules which never had proper scrutiny in this House to require full dress processes to remove them. That's not a normal procedure. In the way they were incorporated was not a normal procedure in terms of parliamentary procedure, and therefore we should look at other ways of dealing with the consequences.
My Lords, could I, in the spirit of goodwill, wish the Minister a very happy Christmas? And could I ask him, when he reads A Christmas Carol, who does he like most? Is it the ghost of Christmas past when he was a huge enthusiast for the European Union? Is it the ghost of Christmas present when, like Mr Scrooge, he carries his own low temperature all about with him? Or is it, hopefully, the ghost of Christmas future when we rejoin the European Union and he can buy all his nieces and nephews glorious presents in the single market and the customs union?
My Lords, I thank the noble Lord for his goodwill, and I extend goodwill to all members of this House. I must say, if I'm forced to choose, a forced choice is Christmas future, because I believe that our future outside the European Union is a great one. I must say I've not noticed any difficulty in access to the products from the European Union, and our exports to the European Union are continuing well, and I'm sure will prosper on that basis.
Does my noble friend agree, as a matter of principle, that in this pandemic, government support for business should be distributed equitably throughout the United Kingdom, and that it really isn't appropriate the government should need to go off and ask a foreign power for permission to do that in regard to Northern Ireland?
Agree with my noble friends. It is, of course, a problem that even though we have agreed new subsidy control provisions in the TCA, and of course we are bringing our own subsidy control bill through Parliament, we are still working with the arrangements that were agreed in 2019 as regards state aid in Northern Ireland. It is excessively complex and difficult for companies in Northern Ireland to deal with these two regimes, and it does not make sense for us not to be able to support businesses in Northern Ireland in the recovery from COVID as we can everywhere else in the UK. So I hope we can find solutions as we take forward the discussions on the protocol.
My Lords, central to this question is the principle of democracy. And the Noble Lord the Minister is having ongoing discussions and negotiations with the European Union. And maybe the Noble Lord the Minister would like to tell the House today about those discussions in terms of addressing the democratic deficit in the protocol and how members of the Northern Ireland Assembly will be able to have decision-making authority in relation to EU legislation and all other matters.
My Lords, we're obviously in the middle of a negotiation that continues to cover a wide range of issues, including the democratic deficit one that the Noble Baroness mentions. And I don't think we're likely to continue those discussions, to complete those discussions this year, unfortunately, and I expect they will run into next year. I don't think, however, that it will be a good solution to give the Northern Ireland Assembly or executive decision-making roles in the European Union. The UK is not a member of the European Union, and therefore I don't think it would be right or appropriate to try and resolve these questions in that way.
You may remember that in one of the studies in the preparations for the single market demonstrated that the UK, before the single market, tended to take US regulations as the standard for British regulations under a sort of extraterritorial jurisdiction. The business media now tells us that the world is moving towards three focuses of regulation: American, Chinese and European. Do we intend to add a fourth, which would be purely national, to the great disadvantage of exporters within Britain, or do we intend to return to incorporating American regulations as British, perhaps without fully consulting Parliament in the unsatisfactory compromises we have to make?
My Lords, I think regulatory freedom is one of the advantages of Brexit, not one of the disadvantages. We now have a choice as to whether we proceed nationally in regulations and standards if we wish to get ahead of other international bodies and organisations, or whether we wish to track other organisations' rules. And it may be that in the future US regulations or European Union regulations or others or national ones will be the best one for this country, but we have the choice to make, we have the ability to make that choice now, and that's one of the advantages of Brexit.
I think it's fair to say that the relationship between the EU and the UK has become very complicated, and that has also been added to by the arrangements with the protocol. Would my noble friend be prepared to publish an organogram which would set out for us what all these committees are, who populates them, so that we have some grasp of the relationships between the EU and the UK, including the very complicated committee structure under the protocol?
My Lords, we'd be very happy to publish such an organogram. I think we'll need an A2 or maybe an A1 piece of paper to get it all on it. But I would still say it's a lot less complicated than it was when we were a member of the European Union, and the arrangements still fit within the norms of a trade agreement. I appreciate they are complex, and I'm happy to try and make that as clear as we can in public.
The crucial issue of democratic accountability and proper scrutiny of legislation and the legislative process, which I'm sure we all want to see enhanced. Would the Minister, with his experience, care to compare the degree of scrutiny and democratic accountability that exists in respect of laws that were made in Brussels and the degree of scrutiny and democratic accountability that exists in respect of legislative processes in this Parliament?
So the Noble Lord makes an extremely good point that it is obviously possible, and has been the case, for a regulation with direct effect to be agreed in Brussels for us to perhaps vote against it, and for that regulation then to become the law of this country without further ado, despite the best efforts of the scrutiny committees, both in this House and in the other place. There is no ability to amend such rules, and I think it is right in a democracy that Parliament should be able to set the rules through which we live, and that is a principle that we will try to take forward.